All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm humbled by your pre-recorded applause. It's such a wonderful Monday. Yes, I was nude at the Grammys, but nobody even noticed me because of the, I guess other people showed up nude. Who would have thought that that would have been an issue? But it's weird. Did you watch any of the Grammy? I'm going to guess no is the answer to this. Did you watch any of the Grammys last night, Kim?
I did watch a little. I watched the highlights.
I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything that you particularly liked? Beyonce won country album of the year. Yeah.
I thought that Trevor Noah had some good one-liners.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Yeah. Tony, you're a rock and roller. You kind of like that classic headbanger stuff. Nothing for you on the Grammys, probably.
I've never liked the Grammys, so it doesn't surprise me they gave the fake country award to Beyonce.
Oh, that's what I like. That I gotta say, that brings me joy on a Monday to get a little cynicism and nasty from Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
They gave Jethro Tull a heavy metal Grammy. They've always been illegitimate to me.
Oh my
Not Metallica.
God.
Come on.
You cannot say you love your country.
How dare you insult Beyonce? My God, sir.
Yeah, Limp Bizkit is a great hip-hop band.
Right. I get it. Look, most award shows are troubled in one way or another. Typically, it's that the ways in which they come to decide who wins what is flawed, and the awards themselves oftentimes have a kind of, a flawed origin story. Flute is a heavy metal instrument. Says, just give me the truth. Yeah.
Well, it's made of metal.
Lee Kopp says, we watched the whole show, Mark. Not really a big fan, but by and large, one of the best Grammys we have seen. Yeah. I've got to check it out. Kudos to Beyonce, says Bonita. People watching donated $7 million to the LA fire recovery. That's terrific. And that iHeart thing the other night was extraordinary. Mm-hmm. Raised $60 million before they even sang a note. And here it is, because it's a cynicism competition. Who can be more cynical than the next guy? And on this show, Mars is always in there. It's all collusion between the record labels and those who vote. Scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's fake. Yeah.
Good day, sir.
There probably is some truth to it. I don't know what the reality is on the Grammys, but I just saw Kanye's wife's outfit, and it stuck in my mind.
I think they made her leave the Grammys.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah,
they
did. I don't think they let her stay with that.
Yeah.
Because that was basically,
she was nude. She was naked.
It's a low bar when the Grammys says that's even too much for us. Yeah, she was naked.
Yeah, she was naked. For those who missed it, I thought about running it, but I didn't really care. We've got such a packed show. I'm already over spending too much time talking about the Grammys. But two reasons I noted the Grammys. One was the Beyonce Grammy for country album, and the other was Kanye's wife's non-outfit. It was extraordinary. Yeah, we have to blur all of it. There it was. We do have a lot going on the show. I will tell you that I'm going to address with Gary Dietrich in detail what's happening in government. And I'll just leave that kind of as an umbrella notion, and I'll double back to it in just less than a minute. Lucy McAllister, my favorite McAllister, is in with a super sticker right away to start the show.
Big shout out
to Lucy. And just as my favorite McAllister, Lucy McAllister, has produced funding for the show, I'll remind you that we are crowd-funded. We have a couple of small sponsorships here and there that help us along the way, but essentially we wouldn't exist without you. And so those of you who are part of our Patreon or PayPal community, or those of you who regularly visit us with super stickers and super chats, that really does help keep us on the air. So thank you for that. You can go to themarkthompsonshow.com, and there are hot links to Patreon and PayPal if you want to join that community. So appreciate that very much. I do want to...
The Mark Thompson Show.
I've got a special guest coming up, and I'll just mention the Tennessee lawmaker who will talk to us about what's happening in Tennessee. Essentially, the legislature there has passed a law that says if you vote against the Donald Trump immigration proposals, sanctuary city proposals, etc., you will be fined and potentially jailed as a legislator. That is to say, you don't have a yes or no vote on this. You only have a yes vote. Otherwise, the no vote made illegal will cost you, and there'll be a felony on your record. She will join us.
Why would they vote to take power away from themselves? Does that make any sense?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is a power grab, so it's, I get what you're saying, like someday you won't be in power and this could work against you. They also know Democrats typically don't do that kind of thing. So there may be a certain, security in knowing that. But I only wish that was the big news of the day. She will join us. Gary Dietrich will join us, bottom of the hour, with political analysis. I've got Karen Dawn coming in. She, on the first Monday of every month, talks about animal news, and actually there's some proposed legislation working that is good for the animal community. So I'm encouraged by good news today. So we'll get to that as well. And Jared Sexton, who to me is one of the great political commentators of the contemporary age. I love his stuff. I had him on my old podcast some time ago, and I'm so glad that he will be back. He's an author, and he's a prolific thinker and philosopher on America's political system and the, as I say, contemporary issues that face the American political system. But I did want to get to, thank you for the super sticker, Wes, a $5 super sticker from Wes. He's an OG.
Big shout out.
And Lauren McAllister, wait a minute.
Uh-oh, now we have some competition.
Oh my God, this is insane.
What?
I know. This is, how many McAllisters are there?
We're coming out of the woodwork, apparently.
All right, so now I have to, Lauren McAllister with a $10 and $9.99 super sticker. Big shout out. The super. But you have to understand, if you're new, Kim's last name is McAllister.
Mm-hmm.
She would be my favorite McAllister normally because she does so much for the show, and we work together for so long, and I enjoy her so much. But she's not even close to my favorite. My favorite is Lucy McAllister because she supports the show with her dollars and cents. Lucy hit us with a 1999, so she's always been my favorite McAllister. But now a new McAllister has entered the mix. Lauren McAllister. And I have to say, Lauren, you're rising up the favorite McAllister charts, and you may actually take number 2 from Kim. It's incredible, but it could happen. It could happen. I'm astounded by this.
This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
There's a new Lauren McAllister who's coming up the charts. She comes in today with a $9.99 super sticker.
This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
And it looks like she's headed for number 1. And thank you, Citizen Morgan, for the $5 super sticker.
Big
and
shout out.
Also Candace and Eugenio de Arnal. Hola. A $10 super sticker as well.
Big
and
shout
Mike Ekstrom with a super sticker for $20. Well, we're getting, this is really terrific. Thank you, guys. Candace Worthman, thank you for the $10
Big shout out.
super sticker. That's it. I'm changing my last name to McAllister, says Harry Magnan. Right? There's a $5 super chat. I don't want to get too far down the trail here without at least acknowledging some of what's going on in Washington. It's pretty outrageous.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I think you can throw around some terms and you can throw around some labels and you can be too loose with those labels. And sometimes it's done just for shock value, to get clicks, to, engage in a conversation. There's a lot of this talking head stuff where they debate things that are deliberately made a bit outrageous. And so it might be that when I mention the word coup, you say, well, that's just hype. Or one could certainly say, kind of, aren't you exaggerating? I think what happened on January 6th of 2021 was a coup attempt, right? They tried with fake elector schemes to undercut the election. They went through the legal processes after being rejected by all. There was an attorney general installation plan, that is to install an attorney general who would say there were irregularities with the election that would allow Trump to say that there was enough doubt there to actually pause things, pause the certification, and even more. They've been talking martial law and all that. All of that was factored in and baked into what I thought was a legit coup attempt, and that's then before the violent takeover of the Capitol, which was to derail the certification process. So I think if you're not ready to stipulate to the notion that that was a coup attempt, then you're not really respecting the information that we know is in evidence. Now you get to today. Donald Trump has reascended to power. Elon Musk is his co-president. Unclear, those are sort of labels that don't really even matter. We know he's the richest man in the world, and he comes with a tech background and with an army of tech henchmen to go in there and actually mess with the government. And that's what's happened. There have been outrageous shutdowns, the freezing of all monies and all financial disbursement from the U.S. government that was then unfrozen. And that's not incidental. It was unfrozen because of the hue and cry. I mean, there was a cry about illegality, but there was also so much pushback that it became clear that the administration in their first week didn't want to deal with that noise. I mean, at least that was a factor in unfreezing the freeze. But now you have this guy, Elon Musk, who has infiltrated the American government in ways completely unprecedented. So he shut down USAID. And I'm going to talk with Gary Dietrich, bottom of the hour, about USAID a little bit more. I know many people through the years who've worked with AID. They do incredible work around the world. And the expenditures that are associated with so much of their work are related to a couple of things. One, you'll either care about both, or maybe you'll care about one or the other. The one thing that they're associated with is the idea that we are a righteous nation defending righteous goals. We don't want to see people go hungry. We don't want to see them the victims of the kind of persecution that we see worldwide and that we're lucky enough not to have in this America, etc. And so we reach out with American aid. But the second thing is associated with American aid, which helps to reframe people's view of America in a world that's constantly changing and, of course, is met, the contemporary world, with a lot of strategies on the part of our adversaries to take over parts of the world, to take over with influence, okay? It doesn't always have to be a military thing. In fact, soft power is probably the most effective power on earth. So by helping many of these communities, many of these governments, many of these underserved areas, from Africa to Latin America to Asia, you begin to connect America to these places in very positive ways that it's a win-win, essentially. We now have an area of influence, if you will. We're also legitimately helping a population that needs it or a government that needs it. And ultimately, we help build the influence of the U.S. worldwide. This is just one little part of that plan. You know, the China Belt and Road Initiative is not so different on the part of the Chinese. Look at what they're doing in Africa. They're pouring money, the Chinese government, into Africa. Africa? Why Africa? Well, once these various infrastructure improvements are installed in Africa on the part of the Chinese have a foothold in Africa. They have friendly relations with the governments in Africa, and they have access to minerals and other resources that are on the continent, and they're not insubstantial. So for China, it's a means to an end. So that's just a quick snapshot of one thing that is being shut down illegally, by the way, by Elon Musk. You can't shut down USAID. You can't do it. It's illegal. I mean, this is a government agency, and government agencies are empowered by Congress.
Well, where are the people that would stop them? The people
So
that
this
would
is the-
stop them are in power.
This is the point, that they have to be stopped by that same entity that gave them power, Congress. So if everyone is too afraid of the rising despot, Donald Trump, and his right-hand man, then they may get away with it. I understand that it's illegal, but they may get away with it. And so it is with the Treasury Department, with Elon Musk and his representatives of his Doge, you know, this government efficiency thing, which they just invented. He has access to the federal payment system. I'll give you more on this a little bit later in the show, but essentially you've allowed a guy who wants to make draconian cuts to the US Treasury and to these programs that are costing billions of dollars to give millions of Americans support, from Social Security to other government programs that lift them up. You're giving him access to that payment system. And the final thing I'll say, because I have guests waiting, and we'll come back to this, is that in that system, the payment system it's almost like it's a mechanical aspect of all of this. It's the last step in these payments going out. It's not the deliberative part of the payment system, like should this place get this money, shouldn't it? It's just the last place. It's literally the place where they cut the checks. But most importantly, all the information of taxpayers, Social Security numbers, tax ID numbers, all of that stuff's in there. So you've given this guy, Elon Musk, and his people, his team, they're unelected and unofficial members of the U.S. government, the new U.S. government under Trump. They are literally downloading information onto servers, and they're locking out legitimate U.S. government employees from that very system.
What could go wrong with that, Mark?
Insanely dangerous, incredibly scary. And we will talk about it more with Gary Dietrich when we get more into politics, as well as Jared Sexton in the next half hour. But that's just a little bit of an overview of what happened over the weekend. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
and it is an extraordinary thing. There have been some sea changes in American politics, and believe it or not, one of them is happening in the state of Tennessee. These Tennessee lawmakers, I half chuckle because it seems so absurd. They have voted to strip themselves of their own power if they don't vote for Trump's immigration policies. If they don't vote for Trump's immigration policies, they could be arrested and jailed. So we learned of this from a tweet or a public media post from Senator Heidi Campbell from Tennessee. Campbell 4, the number 4, TN. She says, "We passed a bill in committee yesterday that felonizes elected officials if they vote against Trump's immigration policy. Let that sink in. Duly elected officials will go to jail, will have a criminal record if they do not vote for and support Trump's policies." Here she is now, Senator Heidi Campbell. Hi, Senator Heidi Campbell.
Hey there.
What an extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
Tell me how this happened. Did it happen after some kind of rancorous discussion about what immigration policy was going to be, or about sanctuary cities? Give us some context on this.
Well, just to give you some perspective on what's going on in Tennessee, we are living already in a totalitarian state here. I am one of 6 senators in a supermajority, a body of 33, who is a Democrat. And this state has, you know, they have the governorship, they have the House, they have the Senate, and the state has for many years been sort of a Republican leading indicator of the MAGA plan. And certainly when Trump got elected, that was like happening on steroids. So this is not something that happened after rancorous debate. This is very typical of my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle. Moreover, I'm quite sure that this did not come from them. I think this came from the Alliance Defending Freedom or ALEC or one of the bigger organizations that's pushing this kind of legislation. And it's really death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, this is just one of many, many bills that are being pushed through many red legislatures right now to see what can be done to undermine our constitutional rights on many levels.
Well, to that point, is there no legal pushback that's possible? I mean, it seems as though it's patently illegal. It would almost, I would think it would go against the charter, for example, of the legislature.
Yeah, it definitely goes against the speech and debate clause in our Constitution, which says explicitly that that is not legal. That having been said, mounting a legal defense of this, first of all, requires that you have a ripe, I think is the terminology, case, which means that somebody has actually been convicted of violating this law. And it's expensive. So it looks like our municipalities, possibly Nashville or Memphis, might try and mount a defense, but that's going to take some time. And this is, of course, the advantage that the Trump administration has. And, he learned this from Roy Cohn, that you keep the lawsuits coming, you keep the controversy and the chaos rolling, you flood the zone, and eventually our constitutional rights erode and they gain more power. So this is definitely something that people are looking at fighting back on, but it takes time and it takes money.
The Heidi in California here, fight, fight, fight. No hand gesture, though. As we get comments in, I do want to ask you about Tennessee, because you mentioned Nashville, for example, and I always think there's so many Angelenos moving to Nashville. A bunch of us Californians are, invading your state. And I think a lot of those people are libs, sort of in a traditional kind of Hollywood lib way, maybe limousine libs. I don't know how they would maybe called. But my point is their values certainly seem to be at odds with some of what you're talking about. How do they factor into the demography of Tennessee? I mean, is Nashville becoming more liberal, or give me some sense of what has happened in Tennessee?
I love that you're asking me this question, because we're trying to suss that out. I think some people are convinced that what you just said is happening. And I think there are a lot of other people that feel like a lot of the Californians and West Coast people who are moving here are conservatives. And by conservatives, I mean hardcore evangelical Christian conservatives who are moving here because they are happy about this Christian nationalist climate that we have. We are the buckle of the Bible Belt, even though we are a liberal blue city. Right south of us is where the entire gospel music industry is, and where the Southern Baptist Convention is. So it is an interesting juxtaposition, and I do not know that we can say that most of the people who are moving here are liberal. I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly also the other argument, which is, no, people are sick of living in a state that they feel is too lib, so they go to Tennessee, and it reflects more their conservative leanings. So you may be right about that. How does this all end? How does this, I don't mean the end of the Republic, because I've got some thoughts on that too, but just this Tennessee thing, this controversy, this is going to be happening, and as you say, it's just they're going to kill the clock and make it happen until you guys can actually get legal pushback of any sort?
Well, it'll be interesting to see if this comes up in other legislation. I mean, so we're going to have some mifepristone laws or bills coming down the pike. We're going to have certainly anti-LGBTQ bills. So are we also going to see in those bills clauses that tell us that we will be felonized if we vote against these laws that they're passing? I don't know. But that having been said, we tend to take things, you learn very quickly in this legislature that you have to take them one at a time. And we're going to push back as hard as we can on every single one of those. But here's the main thing. And this is why by the way, thank you for having me. I so appreciate you shouting this out. And most people do not know this is happening. And this is one of many, many unconstitutional things that we passed in the state of Tennessee. And I think it's important because we're kind of the canary in the coal mine. And when we're looking at MAGA policies, we're the laboratory for the broligarchy, or whatever you want to call it. And so it's important for people to know what's happening here, because I think it's a plan for what is going to happen nationwide.
I think that's a great point. I mean, this is really a template that will easily be adopted if they see to it that they get away with it in Tennessee. And it's extraordinary. So
it is. I mean, our job is literally to make the laws, and this is a bill that says we can't do our job.
Extraordinary.
So, yeah.
I want you to stay in touch with us. Let us know. Now we've got a line into the Tennessee State House. I feel very good about that. And good luck. I mean, it's getting tougher to fight the good fight. I mean, this seems like such a neutral good fight. Hey, you're not going to just let us vote on this and vote? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and this was my argument to my colleagues across the aisle. I said, guys, this is a slippery slope. Would you want this happening if it was Obama's policies that we were talking about here? It seems like you're, as you said at the very beginning, before you even had me come on, voting against our own power.
Exactly. All right. Heidi Campbell, all the best to all our friends in Tennessee. Good luck and stay in touch.
Thanks. I'll take it. You guys take care.
Heidi Campbell, everybody. Bye. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on. Thank you for being here. It is a Monday, and man, what a busy weekend. I have to adjust this little wire. All right. We picked up, before I get to Gary, a sponsor, kind of a mini sponsor on the show, and I wanted to bring Courtney in because she sort of did help make it happen. And Courtney, are you able to hear okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Now I can hear.
Courtney, tell everyone this is a plumber, and it's very funny because this is particularly targeted at our Southern California audience because that's where they are. They're in Los Angeles and Orange County, and but how did you happen upon them?
Well, you've been talking about the issue we had in our guest bathroom, right?
Yes. Yeah. Here at the Thompson Estate, we had an issue in the guest bathroom.
Yes. And
malodorous fumes.
One of the guest bathrooms had a problem.
Yes.
And my role at
near the gift shop, the one near the gift shop had a problem.
Yeah. And my role at the Thompson Estate is to fix the things around the house that need fixing. And I, of course, can't do that. So I try to find various firms and vendors and people who can help us in these areas. And so I had just finished the outdoors. We needed 2 regulators. We didn't have regulators on the main water line. And so I had been calling plumbers for a long time. Mm-hmm. And when the malodorous situation happened, we were told by the person who was fixing the regulators that we needed a smoke test.
Right.
And he quoted us an astronomical number. And so, of course, you were like, you need to go find something else. So I do a simple Google search of Los Angeles plumber smoke test, and I called 10 different companies. And the last company I called was a company called One Day Rooter and Plumbing. And this really nice guy answered the phone. His name is Josh. And he said, listen, I don't want to come out there and charge you a bunch of money for no reason. He said, so do these things. And they were all the things that your community suggested to you, right?
Yeah, we mentioned it here, and the people also had suggested, yes.
Yeah, and so he was like, I don't want to charge you this money, but, do these things. Now, everyone had come in with this ridiculous amount of money for these smoke tests, and Josh said, if this doesn't work, this is the cost for a smoke test, and that money is applied to whatever solution or fix we do. Right. And I thought, wow, his price was less than half of everybody else. And
he tried to get you to solve
very
it yourself.
Transparent. Yeah. And just from there, this relationship was born where they went out of their way to help us. They were always available. They came on weekdays. They came on weekends. Yeah. They were always kind. They did something else that none of the other vendors do or partners do. They text me how far away they are.
Right.
They don't just show up, or they're not 20 minutes late like we've had before, an hour late.
We've had a lot of experience with plumbers, and these guys are great. So somehow the topic came up that they said we'd love to maybe be on the show to get the word out because Courtney was so evangelical, you can tell, so enthusiastic about how great they are.
About it.
So I said, look, you can come on. I mean, much of our audience isn't in Southern California, but we have a chunk of people who are in Southern California. Tony, for example. Tony, you look at him and you know he needs plumbing work. Am I right? I mean, look at him.
Thanks, Tony.
I might actually need a little help. Actually,
See, there you go.
We all do. So here is your clue.
They're the best. And I'll say this one last thing.
Yes, please.
As a woman calling these vendors, and I hate to genderize it, but like, I many times they immediately took advantage because I don't know. I don't know how much a smoke test is going to be. I don't know how much a regulator is going to be. But I can tell you that we did an immense amount of work with Josh and the team at One Day Rooter Plumbing.
Okay, so it's One Day Rooter and Plumbing, and it is at one day, the number one, day rooterandplumbing.com. And that you can write, if you want to email them, it's info@onedayrouterandplumbing.com. Again, the number one day rooterandplumbing.com.
Yes.
And you can call them too, if need be. I mean, it might be sometimes a plumbing situation, you got to get a hold of somebody right away.
They're great. And if you mention Mark and the show, you have a 10% discount on whatever services they conduct. And there's another discount, an additional discount.
There's 5% additionally for seniors, military, and first responders.
Yes.
So if you're a senior in Southern California with a plumbing problem, you get the 10% discount for mentioning this show, and you get the 5% discount. That's a total of 15% because you're a senior. And as I say, military first responders also get it. So cool that they're part of the show. I hope it's successful. We'll mention them every day. Here is the QR code. You can scan that QR code and you're in touch with them. Again, don't forget to mention the show for the discount. This is for Southern Californians, Angelinos, and those in Orange County.
Yep, LA and Orange County.
LA and Orange County. Courtney, love your visits.
Oh, it's nice to be back. It's been a long time.
All right.
Thank
we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Mondays, normally kind of a mellower Monday. We kind of go through politics with an esteemed political analyst. I'm getting the impression weekends are going to be pretty rock and roll. So Gary's going to have his work cut out for him. He is the longtime KGO radio political analyst. That's how we first met him. But then he's gone on to become the CBS television legal analyst and also the legal political analyst and political analyst for iHeart Radio as well. How about it for Gary Dietrich, everyone? Hello, sir.
Good morning, Mark, and everybody. Come on, everybody needs a good plumber. Let's just admit that right now. Everybody needs a good plumber.
I am here looking for plumbers for my audience. So far, I've got Los Angeles and Orange County covered. But
way to go, man.
I'm on the hunt beyond that. Now, look, I'm going to jump right in, man. I'm sorry. Where I sit, this really does look like not even a creeping coup. I don't understand how Elon Musk and his people, and I'll get to immigration, I'll get to everything else, closing AID, the freeze, etc. But Gary, tell me how I'm supposed to digest Elon Musk and his people going into the Treasury, locking out employees who have access, legitimate government employees, to their computers. They are locked out, and now he and his people, most of them are between like 18 and 25 years old. They are, I mention that only because, they're not like people who have, decades in government, and they are downloading information. Much of it, I mean, maybe all of it, is personal to taxpayers and to companies and businesses. Speak to me how I'm supposed to digest this, please.
Well, first off, you better be ready on the weekends, Mark, because it's obvious that this is a 24/7 operation we got going on right now in Washington. And just to step back from the politics of it a second, you just have to say, Washington is at least doing something, all right? Many people hate what's happening, but to use the word unprecedented does not obviously cover it. But for guys like me, of course, and guys like you, there is no weekends off right now. I mean, you had better be on top of your game, come Monday morning at 6 a.m., knowing all the things that happen, including 11:30 on a Saturday night. So there we are. Now, as far as Doge, what's interesting to me is that Doge is beginning to be clearly one of the things that keeps rising to the surface, right? I mean, it's across various agencies, across various, interest group capacities. And so I don't know how long this run for Elon's going to go on, but it is remarkable how much the Doge cloud, you could say, is hovering over many aspects of the government. Now, the Trump people would defend him, say, he told you, right? He told you there was going to be this kind of a thing. And I think a lot of people, of course, in Washington said, yeah, right. Everybody says stuff during the campaign, but now it's happening. So it's sort of like, Mark, and part of the challenge, you asked for specifics. Part of the challenge, Mark, is that as we're now beginning to see unfold in the last 2 weeks, there's a lot of trial balloons that get floated, so to speak. I mean, look what happened this morning with Mexico and the tariffs, right? I mean, I had a feeling, as did a number of people in Washington. Okay, the Saturday massacre with the tariffs in China and Canada and Mexico. Well, let's see what happens comes Monday. And of course, now they're put on hold for a month, and that is the Mexican tariffs, because supposedly the Mexican president, and she's announced this as well, is going to put 10,000 troops on the border to try to help deal with fentanyl and immigration. So how much of this stuff is window dressing and leverage, and how much of it's going to actually play out in a concrete fashion? That is really yet to be determined.
I'm glad you mentioned window dressing, because the whole thing struck me as theater. Trump does theater really well. He does the announcement really well. He does the bullying really well. Now he has America behind him, meaning the government. He's got the biggest military in the world. There's a lot of bullying he can now do, the strongest economy in the world, et cetera. And so he's doing it. But it struck me that just what you sort of hinted at is the response from the Mexican government, which is placate this guy somehow, give him something. Great, 10,000 troops to the border. I mean, that I don't think, I say I mean, I suspect we know equally that may or may not make a difference. I'm guessing it won't. I think it just addresses sort of the overall articulated concern that Trump had in talking about Mexico. But with Canada, I don't understand what his problem with Canada is. He mentions fentanyl and he mentions illegal immigration. I mean, even Lindsey Graham, who was on this weekend talking about, Lindsey Graham is just an utter supplicant, and he just is serving up whatever Trump's latest policy is. So his latest policy with Mexico and Canada, Graham was talking about Mexico and all of the illegal flow of drugs and people. He didn't mention Canada because there's nothing to mention. I'm asking you, what's the end game here for Trump? I don't see how he gains political points by taking on Canada.
Well, Canada's a whole different ballgame, and the politics are very different than Mexico. I personally feel like he is more than ready to have, shall we call it, an ally north of the border, rather than what he perceives to be an adversary or somebody on the other side of the political spectrum. And I think he'd be more than happy to see Trudeau go. And I think that's part of this. But, they too are supposed to have a follow-up phone call. They had one early this morning, apparently. There's supposed to be one later today to try to avoid, I guess at midnight tonight is when these things are supposed to kick in for Canada. Now, what leverage does he want? Is it fentanyl and illegal immigration, or is it other things? I mean, Trump has said that he didn't feel like, for example, we had, in his view, appropriate, easy access to some of the energy reserves that could help in the U.S. There's a lot of concerns for Canada and Mexico, by the way, in terms of autos and auto part production, because many Americans don't know this, but almost every automobile sold in the United States has at least part of it constructed or manufactured in one of those two countries. Okay, Canada or Mexico.
Now,
so, Mark,
they go back and forth across the border 6 or 7 times often. Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect that there are a number of different items on the Trump wish list other than just fentanyl and illegal immigration. To your point, there's a lot of trading reciprocity that he doesn't feel like, as you know, he's said this for years, that we're getting the short end of the stick, even with our closest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. And, so he's putting the pedal to the metal. We're going to see where this goes. Trudeau is fighting for his political life, as you know. He is saying, we got to go Canada first and all with this. We'll see where this ends up. I think the next 24 hours are going to be very interesting as it relates to Canada.
I mean, when you talk about Trudeau, it sounds to me like, you really have tipped the hand, which is he doesn't like Trudeau because his loyalties aren't what other world leaders might express to Donald Trump, like an Orban type thing. I mean, that really must be what it's about, because the economics of it just don't track. I mean, even what you were saying, okay, so you're not getting enough in the way of oil, something, technologies. So you're going to put a tariff on Canadian oil? I mean, if you're not getting enough oil relief from Canada, that's not the way to get more. I mean, it's an odd thing. And in the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal is a right-wing op-ed piece churning machine. Tariffs are taxes, they say. And when you tax something, you get less of it. Who pays the tariff depends on the elasticity of supply and demand for the specific goods, but Mr. Trump wants American workers and employers to take one for the team. This is the Wall Street Journal writing this. Hope you don't lose your job or business before the golden age arrives. That's what he was promising, a golden age, in one of his proclamations of Trump. The economic fallout began Saturday evening as Canada said it will retaliate with a 25% tariff on $30 billion of U.S. goods, with another $125 billion to follow in 3 weeks. And then we know about the Mexico thing, because they so Canada's new border taxes will hit orange juice, whiskey, and peanut butter, all from states with GOP senators. You remember, Gary, they did that once before. Remember in the first Trump term where they targeted Harley Davidson and they targeted a couple other. So you begin this thing. China's also involved with this. And it was only because Mexico made their deal that the stock market bounced back a little bit today. Don't you think, and isn't it fairly conventional thinking, that a trade war like this, like starting a trade war for apparently no reason, is likely to be bad for the economy?
Yeah, I think there's widespread unanimity on this, Mark, that a long-term sustained trade war is not a good thing. I don't think there's any question about that. And again, coming back to some of the specifics on this, interestingly, you talked about him tipping the hand on the oil thing. He said, well, on the Canadian oil is only going to get a 10% tariff. So there was a good indication right there of a recognition, okay, that's probably the one he's most concerned about in terms of it's inflationary or, feel it immediately at the pump for Americans. So, the China thing is far more long-term, and there's no doubt that this is just the opening salvo in how Trump's going to deal with China. But my gut tells me, especially what we've seen with Mexico today, I will be very surprised if Trudeau follows through on those numbers you talked about, because remember, Canadians would be experiencing the same thing. Do moms want their peanut butter prices going up by 25%? Whoever's drinking whiskey in Canada want you, right? I mean, so it's reciprocal, the pain. Does that make sense? That's why economists will say trade wars aren't good for anybody, because everybody feels the pain, right? I mean, Trump has tried to say long term it's going to fill our U.S. government coffers. There's, of course, an irony with that, because, conservatives don't want to have a lot of money coming into the government. And then you say we're going to fill the government coffers with that. But his thing is, well, we're going to pay for other things that we want to do more of, like defense and all. Well, we'll see how it plays out.
Well, we know what he really wants to pay for, and it's the same thing Musk wants to pay for, is a tax cut. That's what's coming, right. And they're looking to offset the cost of that. The last thing I'll say on this, because then I want to double back to Musk and his role, is that even if we can take it, I mean, I understand that the economy of the U.S. is likely not going to be thrown into recession necessarily as a result of these tariffs, but the countries we get into it with, they oftentimes aren't the stable economies of the U.S. He got into a standoff with Colombia. I'm sure he's going to get in a standoff. He's now looking at the European nations, and it's thought that there might be an emerging trade war with them. I mean, again, our friends, our allies. I think he likes to bully these countries that we have a relationship with, and that we have, there's an asymmetry of the power. We're more powerful than they are, so we can kind of get away with it. It's a weird thing. But my point, just to finish it, is they can be destabilized by a trade war because their economies aren't as powerful and as robust as ours. And that's bad for us in the U.S. You don't want your allies and friends to have economies that have become destabilized. Russia and China benefit enormously from all of this. All right, now I want to get to...
Mark, can I just comment on that real quick? quick, because
Please,
I think that is a very, very astute and important point you just made. Okay, to me, the issue isn't, okay, is gas going to go up 10 cents? I would hate that. You would hate that. Everyone would hate that. Okay, the larger big picture, and it's even beyond the stock market and the economy. It's strategic interests. We do not want a wedge driven between us and the EU. Certainly not when we're trying to put pressure on Putin to get things resolved with Ukraine, all right? Certainly when we're not trying to make sure that we don't push China and Russia even closer together, right, with some of our other adversaries. So to me, the biggest concern, and certainly in the Western Hemisphere, you know, with concerns, this thing about Panama, by the way, is really about Chinese influence in the Western Hemisphere. That's what it ultimately is about. And, you know, I think we have to be careful strategically. This is really important, how we treat our Western Hemisphere partners, Canada and Mexico, and how we treat our European partners as it relates to the larger strategic interests, not just of the United States, but of the entire free world. And I think that to me, if there's an overriding concern, I think that is job one.
So let me double back now to the Musk infiltration of government. You know, Kim kind of made the point, as I was sort of talking about this at the beginning of the show, that, you know, where is Congress on this? I mean, AID is an established arm of U.S. government. It's existed for decades, and it's not something you can just shut down by fiat if you're Elon Musk. But that's exactly what's happened. Now, shouldn't there be congressional pushback on that? Or aren't they the cops on the beat?
Yeah, absolutely. This was established, USAID was established as a quasi-independent agency in 1961 during the Kennedy administration. And it was established by statute, as you rightly point out, Mark, by Congress. So there is some concern, but I will tell you, you're starting to hear a lot of rumblings, especially in the last week, inside the Democratic Party and inside the Democratic establishment itself. It's like, where are our guys and gals, right? Where is the pushback? I mean, the only time you've seen it really visibly in the last 2 weeks, in my view, most visibly, is in those congressional confirmation hearings, right? The senatorial hearings. But in terms of policy, in terms of legislation, now Jeffries has come out this morning and said, well, we're going to put a bunch of bills in about this and about that. Well, the challenge, of course, becomes how are you going to move those in a Republican-controlled Congress, right? But Democrats are looking for more pushback than they're getting, all right? As far as Musk goes, let's just take USAID as an example, because I think this is really key. Yes, there are a couple of things going on here. One is congressional oversight and congressional pushback. I would expect and would expect we would see a lot more of that this week, particularly from Democrats on the Hill and from some Republicans who are just more, you know, traditionalists. Hey, listen, you know, there's even Republicans in the MAGA camp. Listen, you can't just do stuff that, you know, we have oversight on without consulting with us, right? So there's that. The other piece of it is the USAID thing to me is particularly interesting because look what happened as of today. Rubio was named the interim director of USAID. He is our U.S. Secretary of State. Why is that significant? Because people have said for a long time, there's three legs to any kind of strategic interest influence. Defense, okay, and then development, and also diplomacy, all right? And this development piece is what the Chinese have tried to exploit in the last few years without getting too wonkish about it with their so-called Belt and Road strategy, all right, where they're giving a lot of money, including in the Western Hemisphere, to try to extend their influence through the use of aid. And I think my personal sense about where this is headed is pulling AID underneath State Department in an attempt to make it more strategic rather than functioning independent from a broader three-part strategic plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's where this is headed.
I was talking at the beginning of the show about just what you are speaking of. I was talking about the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative and how this influence is a real thing and how USAID does that on some level, and it's a value. I've never really thought about trying to bring it into some sort of coherence with State Department policy, I've always thought that that was implied. I mean, that essentially American influence in defense of those American values that we generally all share, those things are reflected in USAID influence around the world. I mean, I get it. Sometimes it's feeding these communities that are starving because of drought or because of politics, and sometimes it is infrastructure projects in Latin America, et cetera. So it runs the gamut, but all of it seemed to kind of fall into some kind of profile of what America would want in terms of influence. So canceling USAID or pulling it back, to me, it really hurts the soft power that America has. You know, our ability to bring people to understand America's role in the world as a positive one. It interrupts that quite dramatically, and it leaves it, as you've kind of suggested, and I was saying at the beginning of the show, you cede that then to China and these countries that sort of see the longer game.
Yeah, I do think, you know, there's a real plus and minus to everything. This one pastor, a very wise pastor in Santa Barbara, who, God bless him, passed away a year ago, told me one time, you know what, Gary, your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. And there's so much truth in that personally and nationally. And, you know, Trump's strength, some people would say, you know, is his ability to, make the deal, right? Leverage, power. But the problem is what you're getting at, Mark. And I think the danger zone comes when people see you as nothing but that, right? Nothing but the raw power deal making. I mean, there's a place for that. There has been in foreign policy for eons, all right? There's a place to exert power and influence, and there's a place to reach out a hand, to be compassionate, to draw one, put an arm around one's shoulder and draw one close in a genuine way. And I think that's the balance that people are looking for now that appears to be missing. And I think you're right that there is a danger if we're not careful about this, about the U.S. looking more like a bully than a friend around the world.
Yeah, someone was just asking in the comments, there it is, Chanda was saying, can the Homeland Security Office or NSA do anything like they did with Snowden? Elon is a spy, she says. He has shown how he is a Nazi. That's not enough. What can we do? Well, I mean, he is the chosen spy of the President of the United States. So I don't know that you can kind of just label him Nazi spy and then turn the NSA loose on. I mean, my God, he was given the keys to the Treasury by the president. So I don't know that that makes a lot of sense. But do comment on this troubled figure, Elon. I mean, he's not... You know, we're trying to, in a way, fit all of these things into our understanding of the way government has proceeded and in American interests have proceeded up until this point. But you got to admit, I mean, Elon into the Treasury, getting all of that information, sensitive information from business, from personal taxpayers, information, Social Security numbers, et cetera. I mean, all of this, even his competition, Gary. I mean, you know, there are businesses that he competes with. They have a registry of them and how much they're paying. There's a bunch of information on there. It's all being downloaded. There's a sense of a breach here that is pretty significant.
Well, I think you've hit on one of the longer term concerns with Elon's involvement. And that is, you know, you can get into the details of contracts with SpaceX and, you know, his, you know, actual connections to him financially. That has always been a line that people have said, we can't cross that. If you're in quote unquote government service, right? You don't also, out of the left hand, take money from the government, right? And that's the concern right now when it comes to those types of things. I just really wonder, Mark, and a lot of it we're going to see in the budget process coming up. I mean, Congress has got to deal with a budget, a significant budget matter by mid-March. I'm just wondering, you know, this stuff's great, throw around ideas. You know, even the drama of taking some USAID logos down and photos down in the halls of the building. But, you know, how much influence is Elon going to have when the rubber meets the road and the House and the Senate have to pass an actual budget that funds each of these entities, right? I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road. I just sort of wonder how long it's going to take for some of this to lose momentum. I don't say fizzle out. I just don't know if Elon's got 4 years of bureaucracy in him. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes these things can kind of be flash in the pan if you're not used to kind of hunkering down. Like some of these senators are with a 5-year legislative plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's the old school Washington. I mean, but as you say, these guys come in with a wrecking ball, and they're not really looking to get that wrecking ball permitted. They're just looking to get that wrecking ball started. And that's what they did over the weekend. I mean, it started actually last week with the freeze, then the unfreeze of the freeze, then the USAID office being shut down and told those people to stay home. And they, as you suggested, sort of appointed on their own someone to run it on an interim basis. And then you've got, I mean, this to me is the coup de grace, is him taking over, Elon taking over the Treasury and in the payment part, like the last part of the Treasury, which include, when I say take over, it includes his people logging on and connecting with all the U.S. government servers. I find it alarming. So you're right. I think he's not a slow burn guy based on what I've seen. But by the same token, I mean, he is setting fire to things in only his first week.
Yeah, well, to me, some of the tail of the tape, Mark, is what happened on that edict last week that was rescinded in 24 hours. I mean, that wasn't a good look, but I think it kind of had a lot of people whispering, yeah, see, we kind of told you so. Some of these ideas are coming out half-baked. That's never a good thing, by the way. I think there's a middle ground. Let me put it to you this way. I think there's a middle ground between dropping something at midnight that's going to take effect at 8 a.m. the next morning and, let's have a commission. Let's study it for 10 years. Let's come back with a big report. Let's issue legislation that, of course, as we know, rarely goes anywhere, right? I mean, that's what you're referring to. That's the other extreme in Washington. Lots of rhetoric, nothing happens. I think most people in Washington would be more than happy with some middle ground, right? Okay, let's make some changes, but let's take our foot off the gas so we're not locking doors at midnight.
Depressed Canadian says, Gary, they are simply stripping the U.S. for parts. Like a company on the verge of collapse, the execs loot the payroll and pensions before they flee. That's a great parallel. I'm unclear, exactly how that takes hold, but I can take a shot at it. Essentially, Musk has articulated, and again, this is if you take him at his word, the desire to cut from the budget. He wanted to cut, what did he say, $2 trillion is what he said originally?
Right.
Which is just absurd. But they pull these numbers out of thin air. But in any case, in that effort, he wants to cut billions every day. And so he is being blocked from shutting down some agencies. We've just the freeze, right, of all U.S. aid and the freeze of all U.S. disbursements. That was, as you suggested, that was pulled back 24 hours later. So we couldn't do that. So now he's looking at these other ways, and he's actually gone to the payment system at the Treasury to sort of see where the money's going. That's putting the best face on what is, to me, an illegal and outrageous move. But that's really what he's trying to do. But, and then I'll stop, and I want to get your impression. On the table, what I'm hearing, on the table is every bit of the entitlement world that we think is untouchable. The Social Security checks of the world. That would be privatized somehow. So you take it out of government. Now, it seems outrageous. It seems crazy. It's the third rail of American politics, et cetera. But let's face it. Musk ain't playing by the it seems by rules, the it seems by the old world politics, all of these things. Comment on what his mission statement seems to be and how this all might shake out in service of that mission plan to cut so much from the U.S. budget.
Yeah. Well, he comes from his private sector world where he runs the show, right? So when he says something, SpaceX is going to do it, right? That's how it works. But, we have seen some of this movie before. I think back to when Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected governor of California. People wanted change. Nobody said we'd ever recall the governor. First time in 150 years, it happened. A big splash. More media than I've ever seen anywhere in the state.
I lost my Gary for a second. I lost my Gary. What happened? He's still connected to us, but his His video feed went dead and his audio feed. I think that's all the feeds we have, video and audio. I am not sure the reason for this, but...
I blame you.
All right, maybe it's my fault. But it's interesting that Gary, there he is, coming back. He puts it into a context. Go back, you're saying it reminds you of Arnold Schwarzenegger and the recall. You said no one thought that there could ever be a recall, and then it happened. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think Elon just decided we didn't need Gary Dietrich anymore, so he got cut. That's what happened. but then that got reversed in 15 seconds. Thank God we got that policy reversed. All right, so all I wanted to say was people who may not have remembered those days in California, or certainly would follow them, was going to come up with this massive change agenda. And there was actually 3 or 4 propositions put on the California ballot, and tens of millions of dollars are raised, and all of those got defeated. Why? Well, because, I hate to use the time-worn frame, but to some degrees, the entrenched interests, some would say very legitimate interests, said, well, not so fast, bub. And when you talk about changing things like Social Security, you're talking about tens of millions of senior citizens. When you talk about changing Medicaid or Medicare, you're talking about an exceptionally powerful American Medical Association and, and insurance companies. I'm simply saying there is a certain inertia to rapid change that is just a reality that every executive branch leader faces at some point. And, that is starting to happen with Trump, and I would expect happen more. So I think I just want to caution us that just because Elon puts out a press release or just puts out a tweet is more his style, that XYZ is going to happen. Let's see.
That may be comfort for those who are at a high DEFCON status. It is definitely a time when things are happening quickly, but again, the takeaway may be from what Gary's just said, that there are some inflexible parts of government that you can't just wipe away in 24 hours with, with the urge, even with the blessing of the president and with a tweet. Vilma says, not worried about the Grammys. I'm worried about the takeover of our country in plain sight. Trump is the figurehead and Elon is taking over. Call me crazy, but that's the way I see it, says Vilma. Well, it's certainly true. If history's a guide, Trump doesn't really care much about policy and stuff. He'd rather, I think, make some pronouncements. He's kind of playing president, and then he goes out and hits the golf course. That was the first 4 years. He's also done a version of that here, but he's definitely, he has in place the Project 2025 people, and that's the last thing I want to ask you about. The Russell vote confirmation, which has yet to even come down. He was really one of, if not the primary author of Project 2025, and he runs OMB. You and I have talked about the Office of Management and Budget before, how critical it is in terms of disbursement. So when you're talking about controlling monies, that is a place where Russell Vogt will have a lot of power if he wants it, and he was the guy behind freezing all of the expenditures in one of the first official acts of the new administration, right, Gary?
Well, here's the thing about Project 2025 that I'm finding interesting politically, Mark. You're hearing the occasional senator bring it up, but not much. I mean, I think that's very telling because remember, a lot of the campaign against Trump was built on that premise. Remember, we talked about it a lot, especially last fall, last summer. And, the Democrats made it kind of one of their 3 major planks of the campaign, right? One was he was crazy and he was a Nazi and he was this, that. Other, he's going to strip your rights away like abortion. And the third one is, there's this nefarious Project 2025 that every school kid's going to be made to memorize as of, November 6th. And what's interesting to me, Mark, is, hey, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't hear that much about it from Democrats. They sort of, I think some of them feel like, you know what, that didn't get us very far. We're not putting that on the marquee again. Because, again, apart from an occasional reference, that's not center stage anymore.
Well, I would say to you, politically, it's not center stage as a reference, but from a governmental administrative standpoint, it is the only stage. It is literally that which is going into the implementation of the last week's policies. As I say, the freeze, Musk very much a part of that pullback, but more to the point, this guy Vogt, who will get confirmation this week for the Office of Management and Budget, he's the one who really wants, he's like the Musk of government, like with the, the more button-down Musk. Musk, as you said, is sort of the tech bro, come in, he runs his own thing, he's a gunslinger. Vogt, not so much. He's a quieter version with an extremely well-articulated plan. So this is to be continued, but I'd suggest to you that Project 2025, you're right, not being spoken of by Democrats, but being implemented by the new administration. So, but as I say, to be continued. I know I love our back and forth on this stuff. You can find Gary across the CBS television stations and also on iHeart Radio, and you find him here. We look forward to it. It's the one part of the weekend rounding up that I really look forward to is our Monday conversations. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Gary Dietrich, everybody. And Gary is sponsored by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, Bill Campbell is your guy. Highly respected real estate professional. You can reach him a couple of different ways. You can text him, 530-448-7474, or you can call him at that same number, 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell, Remax Gold.
Do you feel it? It's the Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
One moment. Kim, speak for me for a moment to tell everyone what's coming up. I have a little bit of an emergency that I'm dealing with here. I don't know what it is yet. But,
no.
Yes,
well,
hold on one second.
We're actually really excited because
okay.
Next on the show, we have political commentator and author Jared Sexton. It is so exciting to have him on the show. So we'll continue talking politics. Oh, I'm freezing in weird spots, Tony. That's weird. Something maybe is wrong with StreamYard, but we're very excited to have him with us. We'll talk politics. We'll talk about what's going on with the Trump administration.
Yes, thank you, Kim, for you. Well said. Well said. I don't know what the panicked producer comes in with the panicked look. That panics me. And before you know it, we're all panicked. I will tell you that basically she was telling me Jared Sexton's coming on. I know. I've been looking forward to it all goddamn weekend. Are you kidding? I love this guy that you're going to see. Some of you may, many of you may be aware of him because he's prolific in terms of his takes. He's a prolific writer and philosopher, analyst when it comes to politics. But I was going to say, if you've been with me for several years, he's been with me. I believe it was the old podcast I used to do. And he was just so brilliant. I can't believe it's taken so long to get Jared Sexton back with us. But he is back with us now. Please welcome the outstanding political commentator, and I can't wait to get his takes on what's happening. He has met his moment, it would seem, on this day. Jared Sexton, everybody. Hello, sir.
What a welcome. It's all downhill from here.
I think you'll hit the ball. How's that? I'm not at all concerned.
I mean, I hope I can live up to that confidence. It's great being here.
Yeah, look, I've loved your stuff for so long, and I think your takes on Trump and the first go round with Trump, I thought they were so smart, and the evolution really of American politics that gave rise to Trump. I for one. Maybe it was just paranoia, always feared that Trump would rise again, even though it, to me, is one of the most remarkable political stories in the history of the country that this guy has, again, risen to power with sort of an unapologetic, grievance-filled platform. So now he's back in power, and I'll just cut right to then where we are. He's unleashed this insanely powerful guy in Elon Musk in what I think is a coup of sorts. I mean, it's a government takeover, unauthorized. I mean, I guess authorized implicitly by the president, the new president. But it's a takeover of the sort that we're just not really familiar with, turning his people loose to download personal information from so many American taxpayers and American businesses and corporations. It's on a level of insane takeover that I don't think we can really, put into any pre-existing category, Jared.
Well, I really appreciate you framing it that way because it is absolutely a coup. And I think the key to understanding how all of this is happening is first off, we have to realize that Donald Trump is not the orchestrator behind this. He is not the brains behind this project. It's more or less looking at Ronald McDonald and thinking that he runs the McDonald's Corporation. Right. The entire point is that Donald Trump has a faux populistic cult of personality, and that cult of personality has been bought by Elon Musk and a group of oligarchs who have gained unprecedented wealth and power, not just in terms of the actual money that they have, but the control over federal infrastructure and the mechanics of empire. It's been building for a very, very long time. This more or less is a hostile takeover. And it's important that the first thing we do is we stop thinking about the United States of America. If this was happening in a so-called second or third world country, we would understand what's occurring, right? And I always invite people to imagine any number of articles that they've read about some country in a quote unquote second or third world part of the country where a complete and utter, incompetent fool, bozo clown has been elected into a position. And we, reading the newspaper and the coverage of it, understand that there's a group of wealthy people behind him who are using him to plunder resources and to enrich themselves. We understand that when it happens in other countries. We have a hard time with it because we're the United States of America and it couldn't possibly happen here, and because we lionize and mythologize the presidency. As a result, we have to imagine that Donald Trump is the person behind this. And Elon Musk, don't worry, guys, they'll have a falling out at some point, right? Like, he'll get tired of Elon Musk, even though he's given him hundreds of millions of dollars, and his help has now given him tens of billions of dollars, teaching him how to use crypto and other such scams. So what we're dealing with right now is an oligarchical coup, and unfortunately, we need to reconsider the way we look at our politics now.
There's a demand on the part of many to have the Democrats do something. Like, why aren't the Democrats more loudly making a point of what's going on? Why aren't the Democrats pushing back legislatively, even though they're in the minority? I understand that. I kind of get that. I'm more astounded, but perhaps I shouldn't be, especially based on what you've just kind of said. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people are just basically scared in the GOP as well, a party that's been completely taken over by MAGA. And so, Democrats are one thing, but the GOP has been taken over by this guy as well, and no one's saying a peep.
Yeah, the Republican Party has more or less become a public relations front for the wealth class in this country. And, we have a little bit of time here, but we can't get completely into the weeds. This has been a decades-long attack on representative government, the destruction of the federal government by the wealth class through think tanks, institutes. People know the Kochs, the Mercers, all of that. Unfortunately, they created a mutant species, this oligarchical class, that fed them tens of billions of dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars and soon to be trillions of dollars. And really quickly, I just want to get people up to speed on this. There's a variety of reasons why the Democratic Party is not meeting this moment. Number one, they helped create it. And that's some tough love, but they had a chance to regulate these people at the beginning of the so-called new economy, whenever they would have Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos to Capitol Hill, and they would basically just make hard eyes at them and ask them tough questions like, how did you get so great? Right? So in order to talk about that, it would need some introspection. Also add to it, we're talking about Elon Musk, who has integrated himself so thoroughly into our government that he basically runs our space agencies. He helps run our national security state, our military industrial complex. As a result, you can't even talk about him necessarily without going ahead and talking about the infrastructure of government. So what we have in this situation is we have the two main political parties, one of which is absolutely an authoritarian fascistic power cult run by the wealthy. And the other side, and we've seen this throughout history, the opposition oftentimes is either too afraid or unwilling to get into what is going on, which leaves a lot of us to feel like we have no representation. And I think this is true, that we have to do something ourselves.
And it is true, I think, Jared, that if we, just clear my throat. It is true that if we make enough noise, I think there can be modifications and even pullback on some of these positions, particularly from Trump, who doesn't like a lot of a political headwind in the form of a social media outcry and a media static of any kind that's coming from the populace. Don't you agree?
I absolutely do. And I want to make a couple of things clear, because what we are talking about is an authoritarian push. And the past couple of weeks have been a blitz, right? It's been this abusive push that is meant to rub our noses in this and make it feel like all of it is inevitable. I want to make a couple of things clear. First of all, these people are cowards. They are weak-willed human beings, which is why they turn to authoritarianism. All I want to do is invite people to think about the idea of a bully. And we all know, once we grow older and we have some perspective, what are bullies? Insecure people who act tough in order to hide who they are. The entire point of this, and we saw this during the first Trump administration, we've seen it throughout. When you actually stand up and punch these people in the face, they back down quickly. And so what we have to do is to let go of all this doomerism and pessimism and cynicism and saying it's all over this, the deal's already done. They've already won. We ourselves have to make a stink about this. And one thing that people come to understand, if they actually look at politics and how they work the cycles of this stuff, they come to understand that we have incredible power over how things are perceived, and politics moves and changes as the Overton window changes. We can change it. We can slide it. We cannot just sit back and just sort of shrug our shoulders and say, what are you going to do?
Yeah. What does that pushback look like in an age where, you can sort of in a depressingly bleak way look at the fact that Musk has control over X. Now you've got Zuckerberg, who in some kind of transactional supplicance is given over Facebook, or at least an implicit giving over Facebook to getting rid of fact checkers and it would seem right-wing propaganda. He has Instagram too. I mean, you begin to run out of options for a lot of that, at least social media protest. What does the pushback you're talking about look like?
Well, I want to start by saying this, and Mark, I really appreciate having this conversation. And for the record, I really appreciate the work that you do, because the things in these moments that I do appreciate is honesty. And I do appreciate people being earnest about it, right? We have treated so much of this in our media, our corporate media, as entertainment, right? Tune in at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. and see what Trump did today. And then it turns into a law and order transactional in which, like, oh, don't worry, this investigation will get him, or this institution will take him down. Just wait until the season finale. The entire point here is we have to stop treating this like a spectator sport. We have to stop yelling at the Democrats, hey, do something. Hey, media, you published this thing. Why would you say this? That does a lot for social media, right? Like, it allows you to get a bunch of likes, retweets, and reposts, all of that good stuff. What I'm actually talking about at this point is what history teaches us authoritarianism requires, which is small d democratic action. So anybody listening to this at home and watching this at home, you need to understand, you need to talk to local leaders. You need to talk about people at your schools. You need to talk to people in your workplace, and you need to demand from them answers about what they are going to do to stand up to this stuff when it seeps into your system, because it always does. Instead of having the meeting where your boss or administrator or a school, principal tells you, we're really sorry about this and we're trying to do whatever we can. You need to create a countervailing force. And you need to have conversations with people about what the red line in the sand is. South Korea gave us a hell of a demonstration of what you do when authoritarianism comes to your country, which is the moment it rears its ugly head, you get in the streets. And things change very quickly. There was a coup attempt in South Korea that got put down in hours because the people came out of their homes and they said absolutely not. So we need to stop relying on our politicians and our media and our institutions, and we need to start banking on small d democratic action.
It's interesting. I'm just seeing this in response. I want to try to pull it. Joan says, the problem is that every time I post truth, it gets removed by YouTube because MAGA trolls report it. I posted my opinion of what needs to happen the other day and couldn't post for a day. It is true that you think social media is sort of this neutral platform, even the platform we're on, YouTube, but it's not. It really isn't. It's a fragile one.
And quite frankly, we need to understand that the public space has been purchased by the wealth class who's carrying all this out. Like, it's not a coincidence, of course, that Elon Musk bought Twitter or X or whatever we want to call it at this moment. It's not a coincidence that Donald Trump is now literally talking about buying TikTok in order to turn it into a state-run propaganda device, or that Facebook is on this side, or that we're seeing things like MSNBC, they're getting ready to be sold off for spare parts. The entire point is that the wealth class has purchased all of the organs of communication in terms of mainstream communication. These are not free and fair open spaces. We can use them. We can use them for communication, educational, and organizational opportunities, but we have to stop relying on them as simply being the only way that we can speak out against this thing or get our information.
Do you, as you game this out, Jared Sexton, do you see any kind of pushback being successful even in the short or medium term here? As this is only we lose track. He's done so much. There's been so much wreckage in this first 10 days. How do you game it out? Like, how successful could some sort of reasonable pushback be?
Well, Mark, first of all, I want to go ahead and lay my cards on the table. When I have conversations like this, I've sort of earned a moniker as like a prophet of doom. Like, I just look at all this and I see all the problems, and that's unfortunately my cross to bear. It's part of being hyper aware, right? Like keeping track. There's a reason why I've been on this beat for a while, but to be honest, I'm very optimistic. And I'm optimistic for the variety of reasons. People understand that this isn't right. They see the cruelty of it. They see the corruption of it. And on top of that, Mark, there's also the added bonus. They're not being very clever about this. They're not hiding this. They're making it very clear that a billionaire has purchased the American presidency and he's serving to further the interest of the oligarchical class. History tells us there is always a backlash to this. People do not like to be ruled openly. The question at this point is, what is that backlash going to look like? I do think there's going to be collective action. I do think there are going to be strikes. I do think that there are going to be protests in the street. The question, and this is what history always asks of us, what is that going to look like? Is it going to be short? Is it going to be pummeled by violence and state-sponsored violence? Or are the people eventually going to turn the tables on this thing? I happen to believe it's the latter. I happen to think that we are going to win this thing, but I'm not going to lie to people and sugarcoat it and say that it's not going to be ugly, that there is not going to be violence, that there is not going to be a gathering crisis that we're already in and it's going to get worse. But I do think that there is going to be a backlash. And I think overall, in one way, shape, or another, we are going to pull this thing out.
That's super encouraging, especially, as you say, coming from you, because you can, you detail so beautifully the flaws in the system and the way it's evolved in a flawed way to this moment. I don't know, maybe I'm hopeful. I come at it with such little faith in this culture. I think the culture of America, I love Americans. I love people. I know that that's not just something I say. I mean, I just try to engage with everyone I can if the moment permits it. But I'm making a broader point, which is the culture is one that does lead to apathy. It does lead to inertia. And you look at our voting participation, you can see it. I mean, look at how disengaged we are from current events. Most of what we're talking about, the majority of Americans have no sense of whatsoever. They don't give an S about it. They're worried about the Chiefs and the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I mean, this is the culture we're in. So to see the kind of rising up that you're talking about is to see a part of the culture that I don't see in evidence much day to day.
Well, first of all, I completely agree. And the reason that this is happening, I want to make it clear again. I said it earlier. I want to say it again. Trump is a symptom of a much larger disease. People say, well, how does this happen? He's an aberration. No, Donald Trump could not become president of the United States of America if there were not material conditions that led to it. A large part of it, this is not just a political crisis. This is not just a democratic crisis, nor is it an economic crisis. It's a crisis of meaning and purpose. We have a situation in this country where for 40 years, we have redistributed tens of trillions of dollars from the middle and working classes to the wealthiest individuals. That's how we've arrived here. Over time, people have rightfully, and people always say to me, can you believe that Donald Trump eroded trust in our institutions and in our legal system and our political system? No, they earned that distrust. And this is an expression of that distrust. So people need to understand that we have been made to feel powerless and alone. And that, by the way, has benefited the wealthy who have been able to pay us less in order to get rid of labor unions and to increasingly make our standard of living worse and worse, which, for the record, they're trying to crater our standard of living right now. That is a large part of this, so they can drive down wages and get rid of everything from OSHA to Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, you name it. The entire point is to divide and then conquer. Where I gain hope, first of all, is a conversation like this. And I want anybody listening to this to imagine that this conversation taking place in sometime like 2010, right? Because what we are doing is we're educating ourselves on what has happened. We're moving past conventional narratives that have been fairy tales and mythologies. On top of that, Look around the country. Young people with no professional organizing experience are organizing their workplaces. They're defeating Amazon. They're defeating Starbucks. They're defeating the largest corporations in the history of the world. And why? It's not because they're part of a political party. It's not because they're being helped necessarily by organizers. It's because they recognize that this thing is not fair and people are dying for hope and something to belong to. All we need to do is figure out what that thing is that gives us hope and something to belong to. It's the counterbalance to fascism, which is always about giving people hope, even though it's a lie. This is about creating a renewal of hope and purpose and making us interconnected once more.
That is a really compelling argument, and it mentions something which I think is truly a viable force that is emerging, and that's the next generation. I feel as though the young generation, those who have been empowered and activated by the climate crisis, what they actually see and are going to live, they may be the future. Social safety nets are in peril, says Early Love. Yo, that's certainly true. I mean, I think and Jared details a lot of this in his writings. Billionaires don't care about you, says Rich. We're just a bunch of ants to them. They're creating one big Ponzi scheme and there's zero pushback. I mean, some truth to that. I guess I don't know what to call it, a Ponzi scheme, but yeah, there's definitely. Jared Sexton is terrific. I'll leave you with that, Aurelian says, and you are terrific. You know, I'm a huge fan. The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis is the latest book from Jared Yates Sexton, and you should check it out. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll put a link to that book under this video, and you'll be able to get it that way, just one click. But again, The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis, Jared Yates Sexton. You know, what a fan I am, and I can't wait to talk to you again. I'm sorry we got to wrap this up right now, but wow, really great to have you on the show, Jared, and I can't wait till you come visit again.
Mark, thanks so much for fighting the fight out there. I really appreciate you.
All right, look forward to seeing you again, my friend. Jared Yates Sexton, yep.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, Mark. It's George Santos here. A lot of people are telling me you're a liar.
That's pure speculation.
What's a little lie between friends?
Morning.
We're in better shape, but I don't think we're in wildly better shape.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
Good day, sir.
Seriously, what the
Why are you yelling?
Yeah, right on. It is a Monday. We've already done a lot, and there is still more to come. How great is Jared Sexton? Amazing. Just love talking to him. And as I say, we'll have a link to his book, Great Writings, and he will be back. There was a huge protest that tied up and shut down freeways around Los Angeles around the Grammys because of protests against Donald Trump's immigration policies. I mean,
we're seeing it all over the place. I saw several stories this morning: Concord, Monterey, spots in Southern California where ICE agents are rounding people up. So I think this is the backlash to that.
So these protests are maybe one kind of pushback of the sort that Jared was talking about. It's a troubling pattern. Trump is revoking the deportation protections for 300,000 Venezuelans who are in the U.S. Most of them have been living in the country under temporary protected status. Many of them have applied for asylum, and in that period of application and waiting, they've been given this temporary protected status. Well, Trump has lifted that, and that will be a source of conversation and maybe a rallying point as well. We've talked about the MAGA takeover of government. You talked about the trade wars. I was just thinking, as I don't know, we were talking maybe to Jared or maybe it was to Gary, but the idea somehow that Trump is essentially getting into all of these trade wars and hostilities with allies and friendly countries, and like there's no country too small to pick on. And you end up with, well, if they move their factories here and they do all the production here, then there'll be no more tariffs. That's Trump's kind of go-to refrain. And first of all, that's just not the way stuff works anymore. As Gary was noting, these electric vehicles and combustion engine vehicles, it doesn't matter whether they're electric or combustion engine, they go across the borders, north and south, multiple times in the effort to build them. They're parts and supplies from all around the world. It's a unified economy. It's a connected economy. We talked about it last week, and I mentioned it to you again now. And I was thinking, where there is just production done in the one country and it's completely isolated and it's sort of maybe Donald Trump's wet dream about what he'd like to see actually happen in America, where everything is done here and we don't have any kind of trade at all. All of our stuff and our products are made domestically. Can you think of where that would be? North Korea. North Korea has that. North Korea is isolated as a nation. Mm-hmm. So they do all of their production and industry there in North Korea. Do I need to tell you about the North Korean economy? The people are starving. It's absurd. It's insane. From a guy who knows nothing. He has his name on big buildings, but more to the point, he doesn't care. He's farmed it out. He's going to do his tariff thing, and then whatever happens, I farm it out to Rubio, and I'll be on. I have a tea time at noon. I got to get going. It's a really dangerous course. So, smash the like button for Jared Sexton.
Smash it with your iron rod.
I am a fan.
Speaking of Canada and what's going on there, did you see that? This comment reminded me of it. Mr. Lord Beavis writes, I was watching something earlier on Canadian TV and comments on their YouTube channel calling for them to cut the power during the Super Bowl. Did you see at an NHL hockey game over the weekend that Canadians booed the national anthem of the United States?
I did see that. It was wild, man.
At one point,
wild.
Everybody's fine. And then Trump comes into office and people are booing America. Okay, got it.
Well, the last time I was watching it and thinking about the last time I could remember that sort of international pushback was during the Iraq War. And before that, during the Vietnam War. Those were two times when America's rep was not that good, and there were people sort of openly booing, I remember traveling during the Iraq War in Europe, and people would say, where are you from? And I go, I'm from America, and I don't support the Iraq War, and I never supported it, and I said I didn't support it before it started. And, I felt like there was sort of like, I had to read a paragraph of my political affiliations before I could even continue. I mean, apologizing for your country all the time is a pretty awful place to be, and I feel as though that's where we are.
Yeah.
But now I need a bit of help. Should we go to Karen and then we do your news, or we do your news and then to Karen? How does this work?
Let's do news first.
Yeah, okay, that's right, because I think Karen is a bit early. So cool. I will just mention before Kim's news that I'm grateful for everybody who supports the show. I'm grateful for everybody who watches the show, shares the show, however you throw in to this effort. I appreciate it. It's a grassroots effort. Victoria D with a super sticker. What up, Victoria D? Thank you. D stands for dinero.
Big shout out.
I appreciate a $10 super sticker, and I do from Spencer Jaffe. I'm back from Lima, Peru, says Spencer. Recall Bass. He wants Karen Bass in a mayoral recall. Spencer in Southern California. I wonder if he saw that great plumbing deal that we've got for him in Southern California, the new sponsor. They're here a short time. I'm hoping people in Southern California take advantage. Michelle Walton, super sticker for $5. Come on, Michelle.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to you. Thank you very much. We're a crowd-funded show, so we make a big deal out of the part of the crowd that funds us. But I do appreciate any way that you share the show. So when you put it on your social media post, or like you'll see a short, or maybe you'll see a segment, and you put that up on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, that does help build awareness for the show, and people come here and subscribe. So that's cool. Can you buy a monthly membership here? This is a great question from Hug a Flower, Chanda Welch. No, not right now. We're exploring membership programs, but right now, and I kind of made this, I don't know if it was a pledge. It wasn't a pledge, but it just informally in me, maybe as a broadcaster, that we've always kept this on a platform where people can get it for free. I want them to be able to see the show for free. I want you to be able to access the show for free. There are a lot of reasons for that. I come from the broadcast world where we broadcast. The broadest audience possible in radio and television can access your stuff for free. So that's sort of our background, and so we honor that background here. The other thing is, I think we talk about a lot of stuff that I want the biggest audience possible for many of the conversations we have, and I feel that you limit your audience when you make it just subscription. I understand that that's a way to sustain yourself, but I think you, at the same time sustaining yourself, you can be walling yourself off to people. So I want everybody to have access to our information, but make no doubt about it, make no mistake about it, I should say, let there be no doubt about it, that the way in which we stay on the air is through Patreon and PayPal, and many of you who hit us with super stickers and super chats. Without that, we're off the air. The sponsorship money isn't enough. It's small money, but it does help us along. So I have considered the membership thing, but if we ever did membership, it would have to take on a different sort of quality than to only permit members access to the content, if you want to think of it that way. So thank you for the question, but it is something that we are working around and, kicking around in different ways. So anything else before I get to Kim? Lucy is my mom, says Lauren McAllister. I love that. Lauren McAllister is the daughter of Lucy McAllister, my favorite McAllister.
Big shout out.
So I do have to, Kim, I'm sorry, drop you to third place. So it's...
I don't even feel like I'm really in this McAllister running. I have an extra C in my name. See, so I'm a McAllister.
They say it the same way, Kim, so it's not, that doesn't get you out of it. I'm sorry.
Kim, how are you?
But to review then, it's...
this is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
Thank you. To review our countdown,
is there like a McAllister leaderboard? Is that what you're doing?
Kim McAllister is at number 3. Lauren McAllister is number 2. And number 1 in our survey is Lucy McAllister.
Yeah.
Candace Worthman with a $9.99 super sticker. Thank you, Kim.
Big shout out.
Candace, really cool. You are one of the great supporters. It will be interesting when Musk seizes control of the Federal Reserve Board, says Dr. E, a.k.a. Darren. I don't know that he'll seize control of the Federal Reserve Board. I don't know that he'll need to. I mean, a lot of what he's doing now is pretty self-serving if you look beyond it. I don't know that he needs to, but maybe. Peter Newton says, Kim, remember the Tennessee banned Darwin? Oh, that's right. The Tennessee legislature banned Darwin 100 years ago, coming up in April. Not much has changed in Dayton since Scopes. Wow, that's a great take. Thank you, Peter Newton.
Big shout out.
It's true that Scopes trial, I had forgotten. But the Tennessee legislature banning Darwin, it is, if you haven't seen Greg Palast's movie, Vigilantes, Inc., one of the things I like about it is it reminds you the Civil War ain't over in the South in many places and in many areas of thought and in many groups. And there's a lot connected to that. So, okay, now we're getting late. Thank you. There it is, Vigilantes Inc. Do check it out because I think Greg's here Wednesday, is it? He's there this week. He'll be in.
Yeah, Thursday.
So, Thursday. Thank you. So that's the homework assignment. Checked out. It's a great movie. You'll like it. Vigilantes Inc. It's only like 90 minutes long. It's really good, but it'll remind you of certain things about the South and about the voting system and about what's happening, and it will shed light on the last election and why the legitimacy can sincerely and in an evidence-based way, the outcome can be questioned. Okay, Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. President Trump is pausing the tariffs on Mexico for 1 month. The news causing the stock market to rebound off session lows after plunging to start the day. Tariffs against Canada and China still set to go into effect just after midnight. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he's now the acting director of US aid. This comes after Elon Musk said the agency responsible for foreign aid is beyond repair and that the Trump administration is working to shut it down. The agency is the largest distributor of foreign aid in the world.
How would Elon Musk know if USAID is beyond repair? It's absolutely reckless. We've talked before this story earlier in the show about what AID actually does. And this is just outrageous. And it's, again, you can't shut it down. The way they have shut it down is going to end up being litigated. But this is the thing. This is the plan. Shut it down and let them litigate their way out of shutting it down.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is visiting El Paso, Texas to meet with troops deployed to help secure the southern border. Hegseth and White House border czar Tom Homan first stopped at Fort Bliss today to connect with the troops there. President Trump declared a national emergency at the border, signing several executive orders to crack down on immigration at the start of his second term. Crews now have removed the fuselage from the Potomac River near the nation's capital following last week's mid-air collision. At least 55 victims of Wednesday's crash have reportedly been found and identified so far. 67 people were killed in this accident between an American Airlines plane and an Army Black Hawk helicopter. Southern California residents, as Mark just mentioned, are making their voices heard about President Trump's push for mass immigration arrests and deportations across the country. Thousands of anti-ICE protesters demonstrated in Los Angeles Sunday, blocking a portion of the 101 freeway as part of their protest. The large gathering made several attempts to get back on the freeway and in the downtown area Sunday night, but they were kept at bay by police. Protesters waved Mexican and Central American flags while chanting "Si se puede," many carrying signs calling out Trump's immigration stance. Traffic expected to be very heavy in the Pacific Palisades area over the coming days. A full reopening of the Pacific Coast Highway in the region is taking place today, allowing people to travel through the area. Residents who have previously tried to get back to the remains of their homes are required to show proof of residence. With cleanup efforts continuing and construction underway, drivers are being told to avoid the PCH if at all possible due to heavy traffic in that area. In the Bay Area, an investigation continues into a big fire over the weekend at the Martinez refinery that left a half dozen people injured. There were explosions happening. The massive fire broke out Saturday afternoon at the Martinez Refining Company, quickly turned into an inferno. Residents were told to shelter in place well into Saturday night and over concerns about air quality from the smoke pouring out of that refinery. Refinery officials believe there was a leak of hydrocarbon material that triggered the flames. They say the exact cause of that leak remains unclear.
I mean, this is a community that has had to deal with so much from this Martinez refinery, haven't they, Kim? This is not the first issue. Martinez, for those who don't know, is a community in the Bay Area. And it is an area that has been marked by these horribly polluting discharges from this refinery. And the communities had to say, hey, from their local leadership, we can't stand for this. And this is unhealthy. These are carcinogens and worse that are being spewed out of this factory in different ways. But this is a massive accident. Wow.
Yeah, it was a big deal over the weekend. We were shelter-in-place orders given and, close your windows orders given. So,
then this is coexisting with what's happening down in Monterey. Didn't they had a huge with the battery factory?
That's the next on the list. The county of Monterey releasing initial results of soil and water samples taken around the Moss Landing battery storage facility after a fire there. That happened on January 16th. This fire burned lithium-ion batteries, releasing hydrogen fluoride into the air. But the US EPA says the chemical dissipated due to high flames, posing no immediate risk to people on the ground. Really? The county tested for heavy metals like cobalt, nickel, copper, and manganese in these areas prioritized for community impact, like schools. Initial findings showed levels below regulatory limits, but they say further analysis is pending.
Who doesn't like a little manganese in your breakfast cereal?
Why not?
And yeah,
Why not?
Little sweet
throw
taste.
it all in there.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do anyway, right? We're just going to breathe it all in, suck it all in some way. I'm telling you. The FDA is upping its broccoli recall to its most serious category. California company Braga Fresh initially issued an advisory for a specific lot of its broccoli florets in December after workers found listeria in several samples from a Texas Walmart.
God.
No illnesses have yet been reported here. The product was distributed to Walmart stores in 20 states across the country. And again, the FDA upping the recall to the most serious category for that.
Hitting us vegans where we live with our broccoli. How dare you?
Tickets for Super Bowl 59? Pretty cheap. Selling for a lot less than last year's championship game. The prices dropped by 30% over the last week, more than 50% compared to 2024. New Orleans is hosting the event between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles at the Caesars Superdome. Super Bowl 59 will kick off next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Why the price drop, Mark?
I don't know. What do they say?
I don't know. They don't say.
Oh, they don't? They just tell you. I don't have a...
You don't want to go to New Orleans for the Super Bowl? That sounds fun.
I mean, it does sound fun. It might... I don't know what the reason is. I don't know why
people not like the Kansas City Chiefs anymore?
I mean, no. I think the Chiefs and the Eagles are actually, pretty good marquee teams. There's a big Eagles fan base, and there's a huge Chiefs fan base. I don't know. I don't have a thought on that. How much is it? How is a ticket? How much now?
I don't know the price of the ticket, but I know it dropped 30 to 50%.
Okay. Well, I mean, they're still very expensive. That might be the reason. I don't know.
We spoke at the beginning of the show about Beyonce, and she is now intending to go on tour in support of her Grammy-winning Cowboy Carter country album this summer.
There you go.
Girl, you just woo.
Yeah, she was wooing all night.
Superstar announcing Cowboy Carter and the Rodeo Chitlin Circuit Tour just hours after winning Album of the Year Sunday night. She'll kick off the tour with 4 shows in Los Angeles starting April 28th. So
I may check it out. I may go to one of her shows in Los Angeles. Maybe I'll take her and Dawn with me. Yeah.
Cowboy Carter Country. Cowboy Carter and the Rodeo
straight up
Chitlin
cowboy,
Circuit
baby.
Tour.
Yeah. That's C&W right here, man. Let me just have some of my coffee while I...
Right. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Yes, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, baby. That's where I get all my coffee. All organic and from women-owned farms. Great coffee is our mission, our craft, and our passion. That's what it says on their website at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It is the best coffee I've ever tasted. I have it every day. I'm drinking it out of the We Could Try Ignoring It, Sir mug, which is available on our website, getmarkmerch.com. But I would say that you will be very happy, coffee or tea, and I know you'll be even happier with our discount. Go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. This is a boutique roastery. Make no mistake about it. This isn't some super discounted coffee that's been sitting around for months. No, these are fresh beans, rich beans, tasting notes on all the beans. There's great care in roasting the beans. Everything's hand roasted. I mean, we wouldn't bring you a product that isn't top of the line. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And for all those reasons, grab your 10% discount on the way out. Mark T is the discount code. Mark T, 10% off. They are a great sponsor. I love that they've been with us as long as they have, but you'll remember I was drinking their coffee years before they became sponsors on this show. So I'm really delighted and gratified that so many of you have enjoyed it as I do. So get on it. It's good stuff.
CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
The bleakness of many things that are going on. I promised you at the beginning of the show some good news from someone who is with us, making a monthly visit to us. She focuses on a lot of issues related to the animal kingdom worldwide, not just in this country. And she does it in a segment we call A Word About Animals.
Now, a word about animals. On the Mark Thompson Show.
Our guide through these words about animals, Karen Dawn, everybody, of DawnWatch. You can find DawnWatch, the daily animal kingdom news source, on Facebook and across the World Wide Web as well, dawnwatch.com. Karen, I did say to everyone that you had what I thought was some kind of good news today, so please don't disappoint.
I won't. We don't often have good news on animal issues, but today we definitely do. It's baby steps, but they're really good baby steps. In Virginia, a bill has just passed the Senate. And the most exciting thing and why it's really good news is that it passed the Senate unanimously. And that's the really exciting thing that's happening here, that animal issues, animal rights is becoming a true bipartisan cause. A bill has passed the Senate that says that animal testing facilities that are government funded have to make the primates they have used, who they haven't killed, who didn't die in the experiments, available for sanctuaries to take in. And to some of us, that's just such a duh, like, of course that should be. But that just is not how it has been for decades. And it's funny, I sent, that's the bill we have there. And I mentioned that it's a bipartisan bill. It was introduced by Senator William Stanley, a Republican. And, but all the senators voted for it. Of course, it has to go through the House and be signed by the governor. But when you've got something that has unanimous support, you rarely have a situation where it won't go through. So you have it sometimes, but not often. So it's happening. It's something I wrote about. It's funny. I think, my book is called Thanking the Monkey, Rethinking the Way We Treat Animals. And that title, besides being saucy, actually came from one of the sections which dealt exactly with this topic. So it's very dear to my heart. It talks about a monkey named Felix who was in a lab and he was being used for Parkinson's experimentation. And it's a really interesting segment because so much animal testing is for such ludicrously unimportant reasons, like killing monkeys to get better oven cleaner, that when you had a situation where a monkey was being used for Parkinson's testing and that it could possibly save people's lives, but then the monkey was being put through horrible stuff, it was a more nuanced discussion. But what I came down on is that whether or not you should be using Felix, why on earth would you kill him at the end of the experiments if he didn't die? And if you weren't, now, if you were going to examine his brains, then that's a whole nother conversation. But very, very often these primates are killed simply because they're damaged goods. They're not fresh experimental subjects. We can't use them anymore, so we kill them. And what I said in my book is, A, why are we killing them? And B, if we are going to use animals for experiments, and that's certainly not something I'm on board with, but I understand that it's something reasonable people could agree or disagree on. Don't we owe it to these animals to thank them properly? And that's why it's called Thanking the Monkey, that segment. And one could argue that there are human beings who would be willing to go through some horrible discomfort for a few months if it was going to advance human health, if in return they would get to retire for life in a sanctuary and be fed and be with their families. So I put forward the idea that, well, at least if while we are still using animals, shouldn't we be saving all that we can, retiring them? And then I suggested, and shouldn't the drug companies who are making the billions from these tests be the people who are funding these sanctuaries? Now, we are, with this new bill put forward by Senator Stanley in Virginia, only a tiny part of that way, but it's a start. It's for government-funded facilities, so the tests that taxpayers are paying for, and it is that the monkeys will be offered to sanctuaries. It isn't that the drug companies who are making the money from the drugs being developed will be paying for the sanctuaries, but it's a darn good start. And as I mentioned before, the most exciting thing about it to me is that it was a unanimous vote. It was bipartisan. It's if there's one thing everybody can agree on, it's that animals matter. So
yeah, I mean, well, I think also the lab environment that involves animals is something that all of us find abhorrent on some level, and that's not even knowing the specifics. When you actually know the specifics of what's involved with animals in labs, it's even more heinous than you can imagine. And just imagine growing up in this cold environment. Your only existence is, to have, these steel tubes stuck in your spine and worse. It's horrifying. And I'm saddened that we don't demand that there be a fund that is established and fed by many of these corporate interests that have these laboratories, and government interests that produce these laboratories and produce these situations, that there isn't a fund to help with the next step, which is sort of rehoming these creatures. But make no mistake about it, and then I'll move on. I don't mean to always be the negative Nelly on things, but make no mistake about it, most of these animals don't survive. Okay, so we're talking about, and you can take me on this, I'm sure, as you would love to, and you will. But the reality is, Karen, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers of beagles that survived the process. Look at the number of monkeys that survived this process. And the reality is many of them do not. A large percentage of them do not survive the process of, and I extend that all the way down to mice, to lab mice. So you can tell me that many of them do, and I'm sure many of them do, but I think a large chunk of them do not.
The reason most of them don't survive is that they are used over and over again until one of the experiments kills them. So again, I am not a fan of animal testing because, as I often say, I believe in a circle of life rather than a hierarchy of life. And there's nothing more hierarchical, say that for me, please, Mark, than subjecting another species to experiments to further our own. So I'm not a fan. But as long as we do have animal testing, which, and we'll get into our next bill of good news in a second, which is to get rid of it. But as long as we have it, we could do so much better. And if, like you mentioned, the way that these animals are kept in their horrible existence, and the only thing they come out of their cages for is to be poked and prodded and tortured. Now, the testing itself is horrible, of course. But you know what? If we had more money going into this, if the billionaire, multi-billion dollar drug companies were paying appropriately for these tests rather than taxpayers paying for them, there's no reason the animals need to be kept in horrendous conditions, while they're going through these experiments. And again, after the experiments, we could retire them beautifully. And I'll tell you what, if we had a law saying that they had to be retired beautifully and the folks making billions from them had to pay for it, there'd be a lot less animals used. The reason they do these tests is because the animals are expendable. They can get them, they can use them, they can use them again and again and again. Whereas if they're only allowed to be used for one experiment and then had to be retired, things would go quite differently, and we would have the majority of them surviving the experiment. So that's, to me, just the fact, again, it's baby steps what's happening here, that it's only primates. What about all the other animals? They suffer horrendously too. And that it's at the moment government, funded facilities, so taxpayers aren't paying for the torture that with the animals having to be killed.
And only because it's the theme of the day, I will tell you that Neuralink tortures these animals on a level that is just I can't think of any in the world of animal cruelty, and it's an immense one, and it's punctuated by some of the most heinous scenes you could possibly conceive of. But I can't think of anything quite as heinous as what they do with Neuralink, or it's right up there anyway. It violates all laws, and that's why they took it to private facilities, because they were in violation of so many animal welfare laws. Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, with all this promise, it will make a blind man see. Yeah,
I'll join you on the Neuralink bash there. And, you know, I was mortified when Phyllis, what's her name? Phyllis Fong, she was the Inspector General of the US Department of Agriculture. She was actually in charge of prosecuting or investigating Musk for animal cruelty with the monkeys used for Neuralink. And she was marched out of her office a few days ago. And that was pretty distressing. But, you know, both I and DawnWatch are thoroughly bipartisan. And I was thinking about this, that, you know, why is animal testing so bipartisan? Part of it is that, you know, animals in general have always been seen as a sort of leftist issue, which, as you know, I don't think the Democrats have earned the right to claim them at all. Fauci changed that. And I was thinking that what we have at the moment is the left hates Elon Musk and the right hates Anthony Fauci, who had that horrible history of experiments he oversaw with tortured beagles, which people don't like much better than tortured monkeys. And so you've got on both sides, somebody hates somebody in charge of animal testing on the other side. So therefore, you've got a Congress that's entirely against animal testing, which is just very, very good news.
Yeah, but sadly, money rules the day, and I don't know what kind of real improvement you'll have. But look, as you said, this is incremental. I think in that world, you have to hope for increment, you know,
that's incremental.
Step by step.
But my next announcement is not quite as incremental. It's pretty exciting. So a couple of years ago, Senator Cory Booker, and Senator Rand Paul got together and put forward a bill that called for, and it's so crazy that, again, that this bill was needed, like the monkey bill, for companies to be allowed not to use animal tests if there were other good tests available. So until 2 years ago, drug companies had no choice but to use animals in testing, even though, and this article that we showed earlier, has a report saying that 90 to 95% of drugs that make it through animal testing fail in humans, because animals just aren't that predictive. For heaven's sake, Ray Greek, who's, I don't know if you should probably have him on the show, Mark, and I'm just thinking, but he's the world leader in why animal tests don't work on humans. And he'll explain to us that drugs that work on men don't work on women and vice versa. Some do, but some don't. So this idea that we can actually change species and assume that all the same drugs are going to work is just foolish. And indeed, 90 to 95% of drugs that make it through animal testing don't work on humans. Nevertheless, until 2 years ago, if you were a drug company and you were bringing in a new drug, and this didn't have to be a drug that was going to do something amazing that other drugs didn't do. It might be just a drug that was replacing a drug where the patent had expired, so your company wasn't making money anymore. Nevertheless, you had to experiment on animals. 2 years ago, Cory Booker and Rand Paul, two senators, got together, bipartisan, put forward a bill to end that requirement. Again, bipartisan, unanimous vote to pass that bill through the Senate. So I'm trying to think, was it unanimous? I'm almost positive it was unanimous. I'd love to be fact checked on that, but it was absolutely an overwhelming support, and I think it was unanimous. Not all that much has happened, as one would have hoped. So Cory Booker and a nice Rand Paul is quoted in the argument, and a whole bunch of other senators, a bipartisan crew, have put forward another bill to speed it up. The one that passed 2 years ago, which they got through bipartisan support, unanimous support, to the best of my recollection, isn't moving fast fast enough. The FDA is not giving the go-ahead to enough of these alternatives fast enough. So we've got another bill, and it just again passed the Senate unanimously. So to me, you know, exactly what we're talking about and the little baby steps that we're taking. You know, my whole thing in animal advocacy is to change the paradigm. You know, I work on media. So to me, the little step that's being taken is less important than the bigger picture, which is unanimous vote, completely bipartisan. People are sick of torturing animals when it doesn't work very well. It's a waste of money. It's bad for human health, and it's absolutely against how most people feel about animals. I mean, turn on YouTube and all you see is people cuddling up to animals, and nobody wants beagles tortured in labs or monkeys tortured in labs. So when we've got alternatives that work better, thank heavens we've got a really strong movement to get them put forward. And of course, there's pushback from the companies that breed them, etc. Money talks, but money apparently doesn't totally rule the conversation. So
yeah, I mean, it didn't blunt it completely, as you say, the legislative conversation. And it is, I'm so glad you noted it, because I'm thinking it as you were talking, and then you got to it, of course, which is just the fact that these animal experiments don't really have any weight in terms of efficacy in the human population. So why do they do it? They do it because of money.
Yes.
There's so much money in animal testing.
And I would never say that none of the tests ever work. But when you've got a 90 to 95% fail rate, and then you think of, you know, that how other things could have worked so much better, like they're talking about they're growing human organs now from cells, and a human beating heart is going to tell you a lot better what's going to happen to a human heart than a pig heart is going to tell you. And then something I speak about in Thanking the Monkey, and you know, I've said to you many times, I'm going to get a new edition of that book out there. But to the extent that, you know, animal tests may have some usefulness for some things, and again, my saying they could be useful doesn't mean that it's right and that they're not beneath our humanity. You can't compare how much more effective it would be to be using humans. Now, that might sound, Nazism, shock, horror, but no, there are actually humans who would happily volunteer for some of these tests. And what I find myself thinking about is imagine. Oh, and you know, something else I sent over to Tony, and this is relevant to what I'm about to talk about with space exploration, but USA Today has a story in today's paper that it's the 60-something anniversary of Ham, a primate who was sent up into space. There he is, the poor little guy. He was sent up into space in 1961 to test what was going to happen to beings in space, and they figured what happened to him was going to be similar to what would happen to humans. Now, folks watching that photo, don't worry, Ham did not die. You know, a lot of dogs, etc., who went up were killed, but Ham actually made it through the experiment. And I was reading, and I was like, yay, Ham made it through, and he was retired to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. Then I was mortified to read that he spent 17 years there alone. But the good news is that we're getting better about things like that. We don't keep monkeys alone in the zoos anymore.
Yeah, they're social creatures. So
absolutely. So that was crazy. But where I was going with this is, you know, Ham didn't want to go into space and do these experiments. Whereas imagine if you were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and you knew you had fourth stage and you had some months to live. And, you know, how many people donate their bodies to science? Imagine if your nerves are working just fine or your balance is working just fine. And instead of sending somebody like Ham up into space, you could volunteer to go up into space knowing that, you know, you would have in the last few months of your life the kind of experience that billionaires pay millions and millions to have. I mean, there are ways around these things. I'm thinking of also death row prisoners who could get commuted to life in prison instead if they were willing to test some drugs. There are things you can do which don't involve horrendous cruelty to people. They involve, and I'm not for a minute saying let's pay people lots of money so that we only experiment on poor people. But there are people who are dying anyway, who might choose to volunteer in ways that could help humanity in ways that, you know what, other species simply have not volunteered. And so these are things that I think we need to explore. And at least with a bill passed unanimously saying, hey, can we allow these animals not to be killed? We're off to a start.
Sure.
That's
great. That's great stuff.
Out there.
Karen Dawn can be found at DawnWatch. DawnWatch is the daily animal world news watch, dawnwatch.com. And across Facebook, she's got a very big Facebook following. And I look sort of at that Facebook following. I say, well, why don't we have a big Facebook following? I don't think we have any Facebook presence at all. So every time I say Karen Dawn's got a big Facebook following, I think, and how come we don't have one again? I don't know, but we don't. So we have to be happy with Karen's following. DawnWatch.
I think the newsletter is where people who are seriously interested in these issues, if they go to dawnwatch.com and they sign up for the alerts, I send out pretty much every Sunday night or Monday morning a weekly update of everything that's going on in the media. And I think
it hits your inbox
really
and it's terrific. Yeah, it really is. Great. I want to talk to you next month. It will still be topical, even though the fires have just wrapped. In some ways, they continue because the cleanup and even the continued threat is present. So we'll get into that next time. But I
mentioned to you the day after I saw you last, our old house burnt down, and I'd certainly love to talk about that in the wildlife.
Yeah,
area.
her old house burnt down. You know, my neighborhood burned. So we know a lot about the world of fire, and as it relates to animals, it's some important subjects. So. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate you. Karen Dawn, everybody.
Appreciate you, Mark.
A word about animals for today.
Join the flock again next time for A Word About Animals on The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I don't know how this happened. What is it, Tony? The cheapest ticket for the Super Bowl in New Orleans has fallen below $4,000 on the secondary market, according to reseller TickPick. That's a 30% decline over the past week. This is the story that Kim had earlier. More than 50% cheaper compared to last year's record-breaking Super Bowl. Wow. I don't know. The thing about going to a Super Bowl, just to wrap up, is there's a lot of stuff that goes with the Super Bowl, and that's the real fun of it. The parties, the gatherings in the week up. It's really a 2-week ramp up, but the week before the Super Bowl, it's terrific. But they're mostly corporate, so you have to have some entry or you have to pay some high, door fee to get in. But if you can get in, the parties around the Super Bowl are really good. The Super Bowl is a football game. I mean, it's a much anticipated football game, and there's a lot of pomp and circumstances, and they do the flyovers, and they sing the anthem with some famous person, and then there's a halftime show with a more famous person, and then, et cetera. And maybe even a good football game. But football is it's a TV sport. It's one that you should see by video because that lets you see the angles and all the stuff to really appreciate the game. That said, if you have $10,000 that's burning a hole in your pocket, it sounds to me like you could go to New Orleans, pick up a couple of tickets, and probably have a really good time. But it's just definitely a serious investment. And I would suggest the great thing about New Orleans is that there's enough party in the surrounding area. It's different than like a Dallas or even Miami. Miami's got a lot of that too, so you can enjoy yourself all week. Donna McKee with a $5 super sticker. Come on, Donna McKee.
Big shout out.
Appreciate that. Ron Cook with a $20 super sticker. Appreciate that as well. Asbjorn says, I'm so disappointed in the USA bullying loyal friends for no good reason. He says, the stupid trade war is going to hurt all of us. Expect the oligarchs who will buy all bankruptcies. Expect the oligarchs who will buy up. Yeah, I think they'll buy up. They'll view it as an opportunity. I agree. Best wishes from Norway, he says. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the super sticker. A super chat, I should say. Trevor Starr in Hollywood, I mean, just to your point, I mean, to brush it off at all. I mean, I think that is a larger part of the scheme. It's already the oligarchical structure, which is well present in America and had been prior to this. The curtain's pulled back now, and now all the guys are elbowing their way into what? TikTok will be the first thing that a lot of these social media guys are trying to get. And, you know, it may be a consortium of them, but after that, it'll be all the opportunists will come in with mortgage foreclosures and all the opportunism around even the natural disasters in California. There's going to be a lot of oligarchical rich guy opportunism that you'll see following in the next 18 months or so. Trevor Starr in Hollywood says, Mark, my daughter Kim is no longer a teenager. She's just out of town. I'm giving her birthday present to you. Wow, thank you very much. 1010. $10.10 super chat. My dear friend Kim is becoming a teenager all over again. She is on this show every day.
What?
Giving me a hard time and always hitting me with the unexpected.
I have a youthful exuberance for
You do.
rattling your cage.
You do. You do. You keep me
I blame you.
on the straight and narrow. Ray Ryan with €5. How about the euros in the house? Thank you, Ray. What is
that a euro?
Isn't that a pound?
That's a pound.
All right. Everybody has to correct me.
I stand corrected.
All right. I said euro.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
I would. I'd like to. I really feel I've offended people by calling the pound the euro. And my words upset.
My words upset so many people.
Yeah.
They Brexited. Don't try to take them back.
That's true. My bad.
My bad.
All right.
I'm sorry.
All right. So that is that. It's not a euro. Pound is more, says Osbjorn. You know, you've got these Europeans who really follow this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Make way for us. You never know when we're going to come your way. Yes, I think there are many Americans who are eyeing the exit. Yeah. No, not Brexit. Exit. We are considering all options right now. Tomorrow, David K. Johnston joins us, and wow, we'll have a lot to say. There's another guest tomorrow. Where's my calendar? Do you have a calendar handy? Oh, my God. All right. You know what? Can I not count on anyone on this show?
Google it.
No, I can't Google it. It's on the calendar. Oh, my God. I can wait. Does no one have a calendar? No one's got one. Kim, you don't have one?
The doctor is in.
Dr. Michael something?
Oh, yeah, Dr. D. We're going to talk about the return of bird flu. Thank you, Tony. You get that. Kim, you are docked.
I said it too.
Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
All right, you get group. Go console Kim over on the After Party Live. Thank you for being here. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.